So welcome everyone to the second of 4 webinars in our Accelerate Learning Standout series. The goal for these 4 sessions over the next couple of weeks will be to provide tools and guidance on how to get your business noticed among the noise. So presenting these workshops will be our Digital Service Squad from the Digital Main Street program. For those of you that don't know about Digital Main Street or what it is, it's a program and service that helps businesses achieve digital transformation. The program is built around an online learning platform, structured training programs, and the Digital Service Squad, a team of highly trained professionals who help businesses grow and manage their business through the adoption of digital tools and technology. When businesses join Digital Main Street and complete the onboarding process, they receive a free digital assessment and recommended to-do list that identifies technologies and tools that can help their business meet their digital goals. Along with that digital assessment, they also have the opportunity to work with the Digital Service Squad for up to 10 free hours. The Digital Service Squad can work with businesses one-on-one to activate free and easy to use tools while also providing recommendations for other technologies. Today, we'll have Anthony, our web development and SEO coach, teaching us how to stand out and know your numbers when it comes to marketing. Please use the Q&A or the chat function for any questions or comments, and we'll be happy to answer them come either the end of the presentation or throughout should there be time. This session will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next week, so keep an eye out should you wish to view it again. The Small Business Center will also be sending an email with resources provided by Anthony after the presentation. So without further ado, I will let Anthony take it away.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks everybody for joining us today. So as Sarah said, I'm Anthony. I'm a co-founder of Callus Creative and also the web SEO and brand strategy coach with the Digital Service Squad. So I just wanted to start today's presentation just by going over a few different terms that I'm going to be using. These are terms in the marketing world that, everybody has a little bit of a different understanding of what these terms are. So a lot of times you might hear me say things like marketing, marketing efforts, marketing budget. Essentially, when I'm referring to marketing, I'm just referring to an all-encompassing term for anything related to, speaking to your customer, getting your customer to hear about you. So that could be your website, your logo, your identity, your social media, your advertising, SEO. That list goes on and on and on. But a lot of times when working with clients, they look at their marketing budget for the year, and all these pieces are included in that. So the title of today's presentation is Stand Out and Know Your Numbers. So we're going to be covering the basics to get you to understand, what marketing efforts are working, maybe which ones are not. Again, we're going to go very, very high level, very, very basic in this, but what I'm hoping to do is to give you tools and give you direction on ways that you can get more granular with your information as you move forward. The other aspect that we're going to be looking at is also understanding your goals and your budget around that, because all these pieces work together in order to kind of overall, overlook your marketing and determine how you want to measure it. So we're going to start with basically, establishing your overall your goals. So a lot of businesses have very, very many different types of goals. But for today's presentation, instead of trying to go over all of them, I'm just going to touch on the 2 goals that I've heard the most in my career. So the one that I hear all the time, I think we can all relate to, is I want to increase my sales. The second one that I hear all the time is I want to get better quality customers. There's usually a second piece to that where, I want to get customers to pay more so I can work less and things like that. So I'm sure we can all kind of relate to these 2 goals a little bit. And let us know in the chat if you can relate to these goals, or, if there's something maybe unique or different to you. Again, if there's something unique and different, especially, certainly book a call with the Digital Service Squad. It's something that we can probably look into a little bit deeper to try to point you in a direction. So as I've stated, the 2 goals we're going to look at are increase your sales and then getting better quality customers. These are great starting points, but they're a little bit too vague in terms of, how we want to start to measure this. So we need to start to dig deeper into what these goals mean. And on top of that, we need to also establish timelines for these goals. So for today's presentation, I'm just going to simplify it and say most people kind of look at a timeline of a year, but some people do have timelines of, I want to reach a goal by 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 24 months. It's perfectly fine, whatever your timeline is, but the important thing is to establish when you want to reach that goal or when you want to try to achieve that goal.
So Anthony, I have two questions in the chat already, or in the Q&A, sorry. So the first is it better to have a short or long-term marketing goal?
It's a good question. I think that you kind of need to have both. So the way I look at things is you want to have kind of a long-term goal, and that long-term could be a year. But I've also seen people set long-term goals of 3 years and 5 years and 10 years because it sets an overall vision. But then what you want to do is have short-term goals in the meantime, so you can create minor steps to getting there, and you can create minor pieces that you can evaluate as you're trying to get to that long-term goal so that you can adjust and make tweaks as you need to.
Perfect. And then the other question is, how often should you be looking at reevaluating those goals as well? So if you have short and long-term goals, should you be coming back on kind of a monthly basis, just checking in on the progress, or what would be your recommendation for that?
Yeah, I mean, if you can check month to month, I know, if you have a marketing team, they're most likely going to be checking month to month at the very, minimum. But we're business owners, we have a lot of time, or we don't have a lot of time. So, 2, 3 months even, but if you can check once a month and look over your numbers once a month, that would be ideal. But sometimes, maybe it's every quarter, you're going back, you're putting your metrics in 1 month at a time, and then you're evaluating 3 months at a time. So, try to make it attainable so that you're not losing sight of the direction that you're trying to go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right. So now that we've all kind of established a timeline, so I would encourage, as I continue to move through this, especially for some that maybe haven't established their goals for maybe the next year or so, grab a pen and paper, kind of try to play it out a little bit here, and try to kind of work it out as we go through it. We will, like I said, we'll be sending a document at the end of the presentation as well. And in that document, there will be kind of this formula of how to sort of figure it out. But again, each goal is different. So it does kind of, pertain to only these ones today. So as I said, now that you've kind of established a timeline, for today's simplicity, we'll say 12 months. And we're going to look at the first example of increasing your sales. So the first question that I would typically ask someone when saying, I want to increase my sales is, well, how many orders per year are you doing right now? If you want to look at that more granular, you could say, how many orders per month are you doing right now? My follow-up would be, how many orders per month or how many orders per year would you like to get to? And then finally, the difference in the orders. So if you want from 10 orders to 15 orders a month, that difference is that goal that you're trying to get to. And in most cases, that's over an overall gross revenue goal. So that gross revenue goal could be anywhere between, 100,000, 20,000, 10,000, or 500,000. Like the range goes on and on and on of how big that could get. So it's that difference that you're trying to make. That's essentially the increased goal that you're trying to get to. The second example of better quality customers, I would look at this one a little bit different, but you'll be kind of interesting to see where it lands. So the way I kind of look at it is, how much are your customers spending with you right now per order, per project, whatever the case is? What would you like your customer to be spending with you per project? So for example, I was working with a client and they wanted to increase the food and beverage sales at their restaurant. They were telling me that they were making, X amount of dollars per sale, but they wanted to increase that by 20%. So and they wanted their people to stay longer so that they would spend more money as well. So that difference of how many orders they're spending right now, or how much they're spending right now per order versus what they're spending per order, what you want them to spend, that difference again turns into the gross revenue addition that you want to add to your business. So again, it could be another 100,000, 50,000, 200,000, whatever the case is. So in both examples, we land at the same final goal, which is gross revenue increase. However, the way we get there is a little bit different. So one is based on volume, getting more orders. The other is based on getting more quality. So maybe you're not getting more orders, but people are spending more per order that they make. So understanding these specifics can change the way we actually track our information. It can change the way that we analyze our information as well.
Anthony, quick question. In terms of better quality customers, I know you had said that if customers are spending more, but would repeat customers or customers making recommendations, would that also qualify under some type of metrics that you could look at in terms of getting to that kind of gross revenue?
Yeah, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of looking at better quality customers, would some other metrics be considered kind of customers coming back on a repeated basis? So maybe not just spending more, but making multiple purchases or coming back for multiple services that you offer?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the customer that one individual customer is coming back and spending more with your business. So you end up kind of going more towards getting more orders, but because you're getting the same customer and repeat customers coming back, they're essentially spending more with you. So as a result, yeah, that could technically be counted into quality customers. And that's where defining what do you mean by having quality customers means. Does that mean that you want them to spend more per order, per project that they do with you? Or does it mean that you want them to be more retained customers where they're coming back more often? So absolutely, it could definitely apply actually to both examples here for sure.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, great. So now that we've kind of established your goals, you've established kind of where you want to be, at the end of the 12 months, we can look at a budget. So when we talk about budget, it's essentially how much you want to invest to help you get to that goal. And when we talk about budget, a lot of people talk about like money investment, physical money, but sometimes time is actually what you want to look at in terms of your investment as well. Again, a lot of us small business owners, we don't have necessarily a lot of cash flow to be able to pay someone else to do this work. So we have to figure out, how do we balance that? Is there stuff that we can do? Is there stuff that they can do? But the most important thing when we look at time is that old saying that time is still money. So if it's something that you're going to be doing yourself, you do have to ask yourself, how much time do you have to invest back into your business to do marketing? And then what is your time worth on an hourly rate? Does that hourly rate, doing it yourself, make sense? Or is it best to take that money, pay someone else to help you to do it, and you do what you do best, which is run your business? So these are all things that you can kind of sort out as you start to put things into a little bit more perspective here. So again, when we're looking at the marketing budget, I'm going to go back to the two goals of we want to increase our sales, we want to get better quality customers. So again, we've established that as a gross revenue. So something that I usually ask the customer is, so if we say our overall goal is to gain $100,000 in gross revenue within the next 12 months. My question would be, what do you feel is a reasonable investment to help you achieve that goal? Is that a 10% investment, a 20% investment, a 50% investment? So it puts the things into perspective a little bit, because if you wanted to say spend $1,000 to make $100,000, you're looking at a 99% return on investment, which is a very, very difficult thing to do when we think about, when we are investing our money into stocks and mutual funds and things like that as well, right? Like average, I don't know what the average percentage back is, but to try to gain 99% back is next to impossible. So, put things into perspective of, this is an investment back into your business to help you achieve that goal and help you achieve that extra revenue. So in saying that, again, in the chat, let us know if you were asked that question of, I wanted to make $100,000 in revenue, what percentage would make sense to invest back into your business to help you make that $100,000? So again, I kind of touched on it already, but we want to establish a budget for multiple reasons. There's a lot of important pieces to this. I've already established kind of the one piece in terms of, it'll help you determine if it's something that you can manage on your own, or if it's something that you should hire someone to do, or if there's something that you can do to divide it up between something that you can do on your own and something that you can have someone do for you. So for example, you may not have, you may want to invest $20,000, but you only have $10,000 in cash flow. So you might have to say, okay, well, I need a marketing strategy, a social media strategy, let's say. But maybe what you do is you work with a strategist to build out the strategy, keep you accountable, do your reporting for you, but then you're the one that goes and does the posts and builds the following on your social media account. So now you're dividing up that work to work with not only your cash flow, but within your timeline, within your time, and to achieve your goals as well. So there's certainly a benefit to understanding what that budget will look like, and not only what you'd want to invest back, but also what you can actually do from a cash flow perspective as well. The other piece that knowing your marketing budget will help you do is it creates boundaries for creating your strategies to help you achieve your goals. So when I say boundaries and why this is important is sometimes I'm sure we all, go to agencies or whatever the case is, and we say, hey, I need social media marketing and I need this and this and this, and, draw me a quote for it. The agency, speaking from experience, will draw up a quote because our creative mind just explodes. We're like, oh my God, we can do this and this and this and all these crazy things. And now we basically created a quote for you that is well outside of a budget, well outside of the boundaries of what you're capable of doing, and well outside of the goals that you're even trying to achieve. So the project ends up not being necessarily around your goals. It ends up being around what is the creative that we can do. And that can misrepresent or misalign what we're trying to do and what we want to actually achieve. As well as kind of not to kind of waste a little bit of time in terms of the client's perspective, because now you've drawn out this huge estimate for something that they're not even interested in. They're not interested in because it's not within a budgetary range. So it's something to look at when you're looking at those pieces as well. It creates that boundary, even from a doing it yourself perspective. Understanding what your budget is can go towards things like, what you want to put towards your Google ads budget or your social media ads budget, or if you need to do any sort of print ads or things like that as well. Understanding what that budget is goes a long way into creating even your own internal strategies. Another piece as well I kind of touched on is perspective. It sets realistic expectations in achieving your goals. So again, if you want to achieve a goal of $100,000, investing $1,000 to make $100,000 isn't really going to work from a realistic expectation. So it's trying to figure out what that perspective looks like in order to kind of, round out exactly everything that we're trying to do. And then the last piece is that it sets a marker of success. So again, by having a marketing budget, it sets a marker of success, because most of us want to either break even on our investments at the bare minimum, or you want to make at least a little bit more than what you're actually doing before. So if you were making 100,000 a year and you wanted to make 100,000 and you spent 10,000, as long as you get an increase of 10,000, you've broken even, you're in the black, you're safe. But if you get $11,000 back, now you're starting to actually see increase. Now you're seeing to see profit from that investment. So, it sets at least a minimum marker of success. It doesn't mean that that's your marker of success, but it sets that minimum boundary for sure.
Perfect. So I have a few questions, Anthony. So the first one that got submitted was, what does a marketing budget usually allocate for? So what items would this cover? What items would you find within a marketing budget?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I hate to say the answer, it depends, but it depends. So, going back to your goal, knowing what that budget is ahead of time can allow you to know what actually gets inserted into that plan. So again, if your budget's $10,000, then, the client that the company that you're working with, or yourself that you're working with, knows that your plan can only fit that much of a budget in. So it only entails those sorts of things. Now, if you want to look at a full-fledged marketing plan in terms of everything that you need from the ground up, it really depends from who you're working with and all the different avenues of where your customer is. So that's another big aspect to building out your marketing plan, is it also depends on where your customer lives. You don't necessarily want to do everything if your customer isn't in certain places. Yeah, and like I said, depending on who you're working with, it could be inexpensive or it can be really expensive. If you go through a company if you go through Fiverr and hire freelancers, you could get a lot of stuff for really cheap. Now, is it going to be quality stuff? I don't know. I personally don't know enough about Fiverr, but obviously there's a bit of a reputation that goes with it. But in terms of, if you're going with an agency, yeah, it could get extremely expensive.
Perfect. And then just a follow-up question to that. So I know that you've said that there's opportunities for small businesses to either work with themselves or kind of work with an agency. What would be your recommendation? Do you recommend they start it off themselves and just get a feel for it? Or if they're not comfortable, just go directly to an agency and ask for assistance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to start a little bit on your own, kind of get a feel for what's kind of working. One thing I would do before doing any marketing plan is do a demographic profile, try to understand where your customer is. Obviously without having data, it is a little bit assumption based, but it's, you're basing it off of the customers that you've worked with and and the people that you've built relationships with. So paying attention to kind of, or asking your customers, where are you online? Where are you? What do you do? Where can I find you outside of business hours or whatever the case is, so that you can get an understanding of where to start. And that might be, if they say they're online, they say they're on Instagram or LinkedIn, then, maybe start doing your marketing there first. It can be a lot to try to do everything, especially when you talk social media specifically, because there's so many different platforms that you could focus on, that sometimes the idea is focus on one and then branch out from there. But if there's any sort of, in terms of doing a marketing strategy, if you need to kind of, balance it out, there's certainly a lot of benefit in working with someone who's a strategist, who can give you a plan of action, something that keeps you accountable, where then you can take that plan and go do the execution of it yourself. Sometimes the hardest part about any sort of marketing is having that plan created. So if you can have someone who creates that plan and then you do it yourself, and then maybe they're doing a little bit of reporting, showing you how to do the reporting, and then you can start to learn that yourself, then that's another really good alternative as well.
Perfect. Second last question around the budget component. So what should be an average starting budget in terms of either dollar or time investment?
Ooh. I mean, it's not I guess it depends on what we're looking for, but I think just to get off the ground, I've seen from a monthly marketing perspective, in terms of building an actual monthly marketing strategy, which would include social media or Google Analytics or blogging or whatever the case is. I've seen plans as low as $1,000 a month to as high as $10,000 a month. So it really depends, I think, on those pieces. And that's, again, it goes back to the goals at that point to say, what are your goals and what are you hoping to invest back into your business? Because that'll give direction on where to go and then what your result would be. But if you're talking about starting out in terms of just getting a logo design and a website, and building those systems in place, again, you could look at anywhere between $3,000 and $15,000, depending on who you go with or what you're looking for and whatever the case is.
Perfect. And then when we were talking about the agencies, you had talked about boundaries. So do you have any recommendations for when a small business is approaching a digital agency on how to keep within the boundaries or budget that they're asking for? Obviously, everyone loves the creative ideas. It might have been something that they haven't thought about, but it's almost a little bit deterring when they realize that they can't afford it or they don't have the time to implement that. So do you have any recommendations for how to kind of keep within those boundaries when talking to them?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to them with a budget, they should try to stay within it. If they're starting to go outside that budget, there might be a reason why, and they might have reasons to kind of justify it. But one thing that I always try to recommend is, you as a small business, you need cash flow coming back in as well. So sometimes it's about taking that project and looking at this thing and saying, okay, I want to spend 20,000. I don't have 20,000 now to spend, but okay, this is my timeline of 12 months. How can we divide this project up so that we're doing it in small chunks while I'm recurring revenue, and then building up on top of it and building up on top of it? So sometimes it's about taking the plan that they come to you with that's maybe outside of your initial boundaries, and then breaking it up into small, more achievable chunks that are achievable on both sides. The other nice thing about when you break things up into small chunks is it keeps the thoughts from getting too overwhelmed and allows us to focus on what's going on right now, and work within the budget that you have today. So that was kind of another way. So I would always go back to the agency and say, okay, this is great. I like what you're doing with the plan. I understand what you're doing with the plan. I can't afford this. Is there a way that we can take this project and break it up into more affordable phases?
Perfect. And then just the last question that got submitted, is there a percent of gross revenue to consider as a starting point for budget?
I mean, I generally recommend like 10%. So if your goal is 100,000, investing back 10% into your business for your marketing is always generally a good starting point. Again, when you start getting less than 10%, I mean, 90% return is still really incredible if you could achieve that. But when you start getting lower than 10%, that return just becomes harder and harder. So you have to remember that typically the lower percentage you invest back in your business, the harder it's going to be to achieve that goal. But at the same time, the more you invest into your business and so the closer you get to that goal, so let's say you want to invest 90% of 100,000, there's also a lot more risk on you to make sure that you get that $100,000 back. Whereas if you're only investing 10,000 to make 100,000, that risk of getting $10,000 back is a lot less. So it's also a bit of a risk assessment that you want to look at as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. So we've talked a lot about budget, we talked a lot about goals, and now we get to the fun part where we start talking about metrics. So a lot of us have probably gone to many presentations where we've seen things about Google Analytics, social media insights, maybe some website heat mapping stuff, and have walked away maybe feeling a little overwhelmed. And let us know in the chat if you have felt that way when you've gone to those types of presentations. Part of the reason that I think we feel overwhelmed, and I speak from my own experience, especially when I was first learning it, but part of the reason we feel overwhelmed is there's just so much data to digest that we don't even know where to start. It's extremely stressful. It's, like I said, overwhelming. And it's just, what ends up happening is you end up just forgetting about it and kind of bailing on even trying to learn that stuff or looking deeper into that stuff. So what I want to do today is that I want to simplify it. I want to give you kind of a groundwork to work with, something super simple that you barely have to look at too much data at the start. But then what that'll do is it'll allow you to kind of give you a starting point, and then you can slowly build on it from there. And I'll explain a little bit more when I start talking about the metrics that I want you to measure as a starting point. And again, as you get more comfortable, it'll be a lot easier to kind of digest.
Quick question.
So,
yeah. How do you choose which platform to use when you're looking at numbers? Is there kind of a pro or con for each of these, or a standard one to use when you're starting off? Because I know you did mention a few just now.
So in a lot of cases, these platforms, so if I talk about, like, say, Google Analytics versus social media insights, they're specific to their platforms. Google Analytics is more specific to your website or your app. And it'll track data for that. Now, it is something that you need to set up kind of in the background to get it all connected. But social media insights is usually specific to the individual social media platform. So like Facebook would have its own analytics, Instagram would have its own analytics, LinkedIn would have its own analytics. So they all have their own platforms. Now, I think if you're using scheduling tools and things like that, where you're pulling directly from, it's integrated together with your all the different social media accounts, there might be analytics components in those platforms where you can kind of see it all together. But I don't know for sure. But yeah, so it really depends on that thing. Now, in terms of website as well, I mentioned Google Analytics, but if you're using like a cloud-based website like a Shopify or a Squarespace or even Square Online, a lot of them have their own analytics tools in the back end of those sites as well. Now, I have a bias towards Google, so I will admit that. But in terms of that basic data that we're looking at, those would be perfectly acceptable as well if you don't have the tools to integrate Google Analytics into your site.
Thank you.
So I know that every business uses different marketing strategies. So that could be anything from, social media, some people use radio, some people use Google ads, etc. So we might not touch on all the basic metrics that maybe you would, depending on the strategy that you have. But what I'm hoping again to do is just to kind of point you in a direction. You can kind of see where we're starting, and then you can kind of see ways of building on this spreadsheet to grow from there. And again, if you need help with that, you need help with specifics, book a call with Digital Service Squad. Again, we could be happy to kind of help figure that out and how to grow it from there. So now we'll get into the most simplified metrics that we can look at to track. Again, we will be sending you a document of this, so you don't have to remember it from what we're going to say here today. But what you want to do is you want to compare internal pieces that you have within your company, and you want to compare these external marketing pieces. So you're going to look at a spreadsheet that has a column for sales, a column for the average purchase price, a column for the number of orders, the number of leads, your website traffic, which could be broken up into two pieces, which is your visits versus the number of visitors, the social media followers broken up onto all the different platforms that you have, and then finally your outreach. So any sort of cold emails or cold calls that you're doing. You want to make sure you're comparing all of these pieces together. That's as simple as we're going to get today. That's it. That's all we're going to look at. But again, this is something that could grow substantially. And again, when looking at this data at the starting point, as we get into it a little bit deeper, it's not going to be conclusive on what's working, but it's going to point you in direction. You're going to start seeing patterns. You're going to start seeing things of, what pieces might be working, what pieces are not, and what to look deeper into to see why it's working or why it's not working, or what's really going on. So as I said, yeah, go ahead.
For all those metrics that you just listed there, can majority or can all of those metrics be used for service-based businesses as well as Google or as goods-based businesses, or would they have almost some different metrics they would look at?
Yeah, they could use for both. Now with product-based businesses, it might be a little bit different, especially when you start tracking like leads, especially if you have a brick and mortar business. You don't necessarily keep track of every single person that walks in and out of your store, but you can keep track of things like phone call inquiries or email inquiries, or if you can somewhat keep track of people that are coming in and out of your store, that would be ideal. But obviously, when you're dealing with that kind of business, as opposed to say a service-based business in an office setting, it's a little bit different in terms of tracking that information, because some will be a little bit easier to track than others.
Perfect, thank you.
So like I said, essentially you're going to take this information, you're going to build out a spreadsheet to it, and then you're able to see things month to month. So again, as we start to compare the data, you can start to assess it. And the most important thing that I want to say is that you want to make sure you have about 3 months of data before you start drawing any sort of correlations or any sort of conclusions at all. Because if you start looking at things at 1 month or 2 months, it's not really enough to see patterns. 3 months is that magic number where you can start to see a pattern. However, the more information we have, the longer that timeline is, the better we can actually see patterns. You can see dips and things like that. You're going to see trends in your business as well, right? You're going to everybody has low periods and high periods. So you start to pay attention to those pieces. And if you're having those sorts of things, maybe there's ways to correct it. You can start to see it a little bit better. Maybe there aren't, but you can start to at least identify what patterns are happening within your business, both on the marketing front, but also on the actual business side a little bit as well. So again, when assessing these patterns, we'll be looking at things at a high level, but you're just high level reviewing your marketing, you're high level reviewing your revenue, and then if you're also getting closer to your goal. So you'll see again, those increases and decreases. You'll be able to draw some insights into whether you're generating leads. Now, I know the conversation today has been a lot about budgets in terms of, or goals in terms of sales, but we have to remember that leads, I say leads because marketing is what gets people in the door. It doesn't make the sale for you. So your product or service and your customer experience and the customer service that you create, that's ultimately what's going to make your consumer buy. So from a marketing perspective, this is why we've included leads in this tracking sheet as well, because if the marketing is generating the leads and you're getting leads, then you have to assess, are those leads converting? Why are they, or why are they not converting? Sometimes it's the quality of the lead coming in. Maybe it's not the big direct market that you want to be, or maybe the quality is good, but maybe there's something internally that's resulting in them not actually making the sale or making the purchase in the first place. So it just gives you, again, a little bit more information. There's a whole other spreadsheet that I could go over in terms of tracking your actual leads individually and seeing where they are in the sales funnel. But again, for today, we're just focusing on the marketing effort side.
Sorry, I have two quick questions for you. One question that came up is if your business offers more seasonal services, so for example, children's programs, would it be better to work on more of a year-to-year analysis?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that could work. I mean, sometimes what people do too is in their downtime is when they actually invest more into their marketing. That's when you take the time to create awareness so that by the time that cycle comes back, you're right in the full kind of buying speed. Maybe that's when you're collecting your leads. Maybe that's when you're generating the lead generation part of it. But then when it comes to actually the actual seasonal component of your business, that's when the sales start to convert. So, it could be, you still want to kind of address your marketing stuff on a month by month basis, because you want to see how all of it's kind of working together, so that when when time comes that you are into sales season, you can start to understand what's actually working, what's not working. Maybe again, if you're keeping track of your sales funnel, you know who to reach back out to because they've contacted you in your off season. So it really does depend. I think I'd have to know a little bit more of the business itself, but just off the top of my head, I think that's kind of how I would look at that, if that answers that question.
Perfect. And then one of the last questions, so you said that the more data that we have is the better, and you recommended that 3 months is the absolute minimum in order to start seeing patterns. What happens if someone doesn't have 3 months of data? Should they just start off a marketing campaign and kind of see where things go, and then evaluate after the 3 months, or what would you recommend for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to a little bit of an earlier question we had as well, where if you don't have data, it doesn't necessarily mean don't start a marketing campaign. Where again, you start is identify who your customer is, try to identify where they are, where you're going to reach them with your marketing efforts, and then build out some sort of strategy to target where you believe they are and start there. As you start to see the data come back, you can start to get some more understanding of, are they actually where I think they are? And if you are dabbling in a couple other different side pieces as well in terms of like other social media options, you can maybe start to see traction in other areas that maybe you didn't think were actually going to work. So it's not necessarily if you don't have the data, don't do a marketing strategy. It's actually if you don't have the data, start trying to do stuff to see what's actually working.
Thank you.
Correct. So yeah, as I said, a lot of this is about just finding patterns and things like that within it. So, I already kind of draw on. So if you start to see, let's say, an increase of website traffic and you happen to see an increase in leads, you can, again, dive deeper into that information, see if there's a correlation between them. You can also draw out things. And this is, I think, the biggest piece is that you can draw out things like, how much web traffic do I need to generate a lead? Potentially how many followers or how many impressions do I need to generate a lead? You can start to take a look at what that data looks like. Now, I stay a little bit away from the followers example on social media because, as we know, you could have a ton of followers, but if they're not quality followers, then they may not generate sales. So it's about getting close. So I won't get too much into that. But what we are looking at, so I think even I think one of the DSS clients actually tell me that on the back end of Shopify, it had suggested that you need about 1,000 people to hit your website before you can generate a sale. That's Spotify's like generic average number. But if you can actually keep track of this data on your own, you can see what number actually pertains to your specific business. So how much web traffic do you need to generate a lead? And then you can start to figure out, okay, do I need to close that gap? Do I need that number to get less? Or if you're happy with the number that it's at in terms of the amount of traffic to a lead, then maybe you have a better understanding of what that conversion looks like. And then if you're tracking your leads, you have a better understanding of the quality of that lead and what your sales conversion looks like. So now it becomes easier to understand how are we going to get to your goal, because we can actually look at things from a marketing perspective. Because again, as marketers, we can't control your sales, we can control your leads, and we can control the other metrics like website traffic, impressions, followers, and those sorts of things. But if we can create a quantifiable metric around what that marketing metric looks like and what it looks like to you as a business metric, now we're starting to mold the pieces together. So that's essentially everything that I wanted to go through. But again, this isn't about making conclusions. It's about just drawing correlation, trying to understand it a little bit more. Again, this data is very, very, very high level that we would be looking at and that I would be creating the spreadsheet for and showing you. But it'll at least give you a direction of where to look and maybe where to start putting some resources and things like that as well. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to take them. And obviously I'm happy for everybody is here and appreciate everybody coming out. If there's any other questions, we can take them, or I can also go over the spreadsheet as well, just so you can kind of see it firsthand.
Anthony, if you want to go over some of the spreadsheet, I know there was a few people that had said they were frantically taking notes on the metrics to track and compare, and I ended up posting it in the chat. But if you just want to kind of go over that spreadsheet just so they can see, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. So I'll just share my screen here. Okay. So I shared my screen. So the spreadsheet that you'll get will have essentially 3 different tabs within it. The first tab here is just going to be your goals and budget. So I've outlined also how to use the template. So there's a little bit of instruction here. It doesn't obviously go into as much detail as what we talked about, but it'll high level kind of hit on these pieces. What I asked to do is that you want to state your goal. So state just the basic goal, I want to increase my sales, but then elaborate on that. What does that mean? What does that actually translate to? As you start to look at that translation, you can start to realize what the increase is that you're trying to do and what you're trying to grow. Once you do, you can set essentially your revenue goal. After setting your revenue goal, you can now look at what your estimated marketing budget would look like. All you have to do in this situation is just change the percentage you want to invest. So if I change it to 20%, it's a formula-driven Excel sheet, so it'll automatically change it. If you want to make it 15%, it'll draw it down that way. So you can get a little bit, instead of obviously typing it in, 100,000 is easy to work with, but if you have other goals that are maybe not so exact as like 100,000, then this percentage formula could certainly be helpful. And then obviously any additional notes you want to add, I left it there. I'm not sure if there would be any, but it's there in case you need it as well. This is a spreadsheet. This is a sheet that you can always kind of refer back to as you're going through the year and starting to see, am I getting closer to this goal? Am I achieving this goal? Do I need to make adjustments to this goal? Based off of what I'm actually seeing in my metrics. The next tab here is the metrics. So we have it broken down here on the left-hand side is the month of the year. So obviously from January to December. And then we have the metrics broken down again like this. So you have your monthly gross revenue. So you're going to track basically the revenue that you make every month, the number of orders you got that month, the average price per order, the leads you've generated. And then we have the website visits, traffic visit sessions. Depending on the platform, it might be called something different. So I just included the 3 different names that I see. Users and visitors. So again, this is one is the number of people that hit your site, or the number of times your site has been hit. The other option is the number of times one user has been hit. So example here, you might have 170 visits to your website, but only 140 people hit it. That means these people have actually hit it. Some of these people have hit it multiple times. I can show you, I'll have another little screenshot. I can show you where you find that data in Google Analytics. The next piece is just breaking out your social media. So what I've done, instead of trying to analyze how many followers did I gain that month, to make this really, really simple, you just have to go to your social media page and look at what your current following number is that month. So if your current following that month is 400, type in 400. If the next month it's 410, type in 410. You don't have to worry about going into what the social media insights actually are. This is something where you don't even have to go dig deeper into it. It's right there on your profile. Very simple and easy to look at. Again, this section could grow. You could add things like social media impressions or how many DMs you received that month or sent out. Those types of things could certainly keep growing this metric, this section of the spreadsheet. And then lastly, I always just like to include your outreach. So again, how many cold calls you made, how many emails you made. Again, every business is different. Some people don't have to do this. So if it's 0 every month, or you just want to remove that section from the spreadsheet, perfectly fine. Again, this is to be, customized to whatever works for you. And then the last piece is just graphs. I know a lot of us are visual. So I've basically broken these down into different graphs that we can look at. So you can look at overall revenue, overall price per average price, leads versus orders, your website metrics, all your social media metrics, and then your overall outreach metrics. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to visualize the pattern and see the patterns when you're looking at it visually, rather than just looking at it numbers in a grid. So I've kind of built it out. Again, it's very, very basic, very generalized. But take this sheet, customize it to what works for you, and just take it from there. So I'll stop sharing this one and I'll just quickly show the screen of my Google Analytics. So for those of you that use Google Analytics, this is where you'll essentially find your users versus your sessions. So under audience and overview, you'll be able to see the number of users that visited. You'll also be able to see the number of sessions that came through this month. So again, your session is the number of visits, and your users is obviously the number of unique users that have hit your site. In the top right corner, I've also circled where you can have that date range. So you can change it. So you can change it for the specific month, and then you can see what that, analyze it on a month-to-month level as well. Now, again, with the website metrics, although we're starting with just sessions and users, you could grow that section as well and include things like the number of pages viewed per session, which is this metric here. If you can see my cursor on the right hand side, you could do average session duration. Right? You can start to see different pieces. It all depends on your goals. I don't want to get too granular in that and start to overwhelm. So I just want to focus on users and sessions right now. So yeah, so that's essentially it. That's the spreadsheet. So if there's any other questions about the spreadsheet or anything about the presentation, obviously be happy to take them.
Okay, everyone. So if you have any last minute questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will make sure that Anthony answers them before we end the webinar. Give a minute to let everyone type in before we kind of move to concluding remarks. Okay, well, I don't see anything popping up. So on that note, thank you, Anthony. I hope everyone learned some valuable knowledge around marketing metrics. I know I did. As mentioned at the start of the webinar, this session was recorded and we will be uploading it to our YouTube channel in the next week. So keep an eye out should you wish to view it again. The Small Business Center will also be sending an email with the resources provided by Anthony now that the presentation is wrapping up. Let me just make sure. I think there might be one more question. Nope. Perfect. So with that being said, if you haven't done so already, there's still lots of time to register for part 3 of this series, Stand Out in Their Inbox. This will cover everything that you need to know around email marketing, from email list growth hacks to getting clients to actually open your emails. So we hope to see you all next week and have a great rest of your day.